Who says no one cares about modern wrestlers? Who says these individuals aren't really stars? Who says they're all replaceable and it's all about the big brand on the side of the bus? What's up, everyone? I am Rob. This is the Nocturnal Knockout, a podcast right here on the Brass Ring Media YouTube channel. What's going on, guys? Happy Wednesday. What do you guys got going on tonight? Are you strapping in to watch 4 hours of AEW? Is it going to be thrilling action? Is AEW going to seize on all this momentum I talked about last week? Well, I'm going to take you to the start of AEW today. We are going to hang out for about an hour. We're going to talk about two things. We're going to relive RTruth's main event push from 2011. We're going to talk about the highs, the lows, and what did and didn't work. Basically, this is going to be our tribute to Truth. And then, what's up, Lady Mike? If we have a little bit more time at the end, we'll go ahead and do a little bit of Money in the Bank preview. In the meantime, while I'm talking, while I'm giving my takes, while I'm reliving Truth's time in the sun, you can go ahead and like, share, and subscribe. You got all the info right down in there, even my incorrectly spelled name, which apparently is my new gimmick. What's up, guys? And the other thing you can do before we get into our conversation is you could do what Mike and E have done and go ahead and get your comments into the chat. I'm sure you guys have a lot of thoughts on the releases of the last couple of days, on the speculations of the releases coming up. Go ahead and let me know. How do you feel about this? We're used to a dark day, Black Saturday, Black Friday, whatever day of the week it falls on after WrestleMania season. This isn't directly after WrestleMania season. This is a little bit of a delay, and it's not a ton of superstars as we're used to seeing. But the impact it had on the WWE audience of the release of one superstar has had ripple effects. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I just cannot open my phone, this thing you read over here. I cannot open it to any of my regular social media sites that I follow wrestling content and not see stuff about RTruth. I mean, and I don't mean this to be dark, but you would almost assume that something really, really bad would have happened to the guy if you didn't know that he got released. Now, I'm not saying that to be critical of any of you guys, myself included. I'm dedicated an hour right now. What's up, Fernando? What's up? To talk about Truth. So I get the resonance he has. He's got it with me. He's got it with my son, who's obviously much younger than me and just absolutely loves RTruth. This guy had such an impact on WWE viewers and seemingly on the culture of that company that despite his very, very low place on the card, it seems like WWE found one of their unreleasables. Like, I think a lot of us just assumed that RTruth was going to be like the Brooklyn Brawler. Remember when the Brooklyn Brawler got released in like 2016? And it was amazing that the Brooklyn Brawler ever got released. I mean, it's amazing that Brooklyn Brawler stayed under contract for like 30 years. The guy only won like 2 matches in that entire time. But he was a valuable asset to the company. He was a big deal backstage. And so he lasted in that company for like 30 years. I think we all assume RTruth was going to be a guy like that. That's why on Sunday, when the news came down, it again was akin, the way people are talking about it, as like a wrestling tragedy, which I think for some people in the context of obviously Truth is okay. He's, as a human being, he's doing fine for all we know. I mean, out of a job, which totally sucks, but I gotta believe my man Ron is gonna bounce back. But it was treated with that level of disdain. Last week, we got on this very show. I opened this mic and I talked about the goodwill that seemingly AEW kind of has right now, and the goodwill that WWE is starting to squander and wear down their fans. This obviously does not help in the column of keeping goodwill with your fans. Now, I don't know how many fans WWE would really lose over this, but it's just another cut. And I don't mean that in terms of a budget cut, which it probably is. And we've heard some of the reporting about the contract offer maybe not being up to what RTruth felt that he was worth. But it's a little cut on the 1,000 cuts, the death of 1,000 cuts. And again, for reference, I do not think WWE is going to die. I do not think they are going to go out of business. I do not think AEW is going to overtake WWE because they released RTruth. It's rarely this one thing that takes down a company, but it's all these little things. It's all these little things. Let me catch up on some of your chats because you guys have some takes on this. So Lady Mike says she's on RVD's X and watching it, and someone made an RTruth song, basically a Joe Hendry song. Well, I believe in Ron Killings. I do. I believe in him. I don't know about you guys. Fernando says Truth is one of the top merch sellers. Some of the people out there who are calling this a business decision need to stop. I think it might be a little more nuanced than that, Fernando. He says it's the TKO people trying to save money. TKO has been a blessing and a curse for WWE. Yeah, the corporate era. Who'd have thought WWE could get more corporate than they were before, but we're actually in a corporate era. They were like and this sounds like you're giving them too much credit. They were like a renegade corporation before. Now they're like a real corporation. And in as much to an extent that a wrestling company, which I think in some senses they definitely still are, can actually be. There's plenty of truth chance. I don't think they're going to shut down the company of it, but there were plenty of them. To the point that CM Punk commented on them on Monday. So there were chance. Again, it's not like the guy main evented WrestleMania last year. It's not like we were projecting him to main event WrestleMania this year. So I don't think we lost out on that. It's just someone that was very beloved, someone that felt like the furniture. And I think that's what it is. And also, I think it's hard for people in their brains to rationalize what this guy didn't bring to the table. It's not like he was a guy that was getting in trouble a lot. It's not like he's a guy that the crowd and the fan base had indifference toward. At the same time, he was 53 years old, and I could see maybe the company that was contracting him having a different idea about his value at the age of 53 than he does. He knows it's, his own body. He knows what he's got left. So in that sense, it could be a business decision. Now, business decisions are not always right decisions, even if they are business decisions. No, and you're seceding from Brass Ring Media, Azan? Are you saying, Azan? Are you saying it's a conspiracy? I think you are. I think that's what you're getting at, Azan, that it's a conspiracy. See, Azan, he did it all for all you little Jimmies out there, and none of you guys have appreciated any of it. Now, what main events is Azan in? None, right? He's here chatting, and so that's why he's having to secede from Brass Ring Media. Thanks for the segue, Azan. Really appreciate it. Love when you guys in the chat can kind of co-produce the show. So I gave that big preamble to say that we're going to talk about truth today. But not only, we're going to talk about a specific time period in RTruth's career. We'll go back to the time period where he was not necessarily more over than he was in the last couple of years. And when he comes to the Judgment Day and a few other things, he did have some pretty big storylines over the last few years. And let us not forget that his most recent major thing he did was be in a title match with the heel John Cena. So there's significance all the way to the very end. That's a good question, E. And we'll leave that up there. And I want you guys throughout the entirety of this show, being that we are doing a little bit of a tribute to truth. What was your favorite RTruth moment. I gotta say, if I'm gonna give one, I don't know if it's a moment necessarily, but the most I was ever engaged with RTruth outside of some of the stuff we're going to talk about a little bit later, because I did find some of that stuff fairly engaging. It probably goes back to the 24/7 stuff. That was to me like the perfect mix of truth as comedy, but also the earnestness that he put into everything he did, and then him playing off of and I can't think of Rockstar Spud, but what was it? Drake Maverick. Him playing off of him playing off of Carmella, everything that was involved in that whole little run, and RTruth was seemingly the nexus of all of it at a time when we really, really needed that stuff. I got that era as being sort of his peak in terms of where his place on the card felt very appropriate for his talent level, his age, what he brought to the table. The fact, if anything, they overachieved. They made this stupid title that was stupid in nature be entertaining, largely because of his stupidity. So he said he made the 24/7. Any promotion can give RTruth anything, and he will get over. Almost anything. There's a few things he wasn't able to get over in his career. Couldn't quite get K-Quick over to the level that she would have liked. But I've talked enough. I've said my piece. Why don't I talk a little bit more? Not PacMan. Yeah, he did not get PacMan over. He did well in TA. He didn't get PacMan over there. So let's talk about what I'm going to refer to as the moment of truth. Now, despite all that hardware you're seeing on the screen right in front of you, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, thank you. Despite all that hardware that Truth won throughout his career, and he did win quite a bit of hardware, he was never really a main event guy. He only contended for major titles on rare occasions, and he never had a major run in WWE with a major title. One of the few of his tenure that's going to go down with that specific distinction. I think even when it's all said and done, a guy like Sami Zayn is probably going to have a world title reign under his belt, and Kofi Kingston has that knocked out. So maybe the Triple H era will yield different results, and not everyone will have a title. But he's one of the few people that was active in his time period that never got to that pinnacle. PacMan was pretty over in the Script Club, though. Script, that's what he called it. PacMan versus Roger Goodell. I wish TNA would have booked that in 2006. That's something I wanted to see. I remember there being stories at the time about like one of the guys that PacMan entourage shot being like a security guard for TNA, and people like, or being some like a worker with TNA. I don't know. This was something that was like actually on, I want to say like PTI or something back in the day, PTI around the Horde. And like they weren't using the term, is he going to shoot on him? But they were really worried that in this fake wrestling, this security guard was going to beat up PacMan Jones. God, what a throwback that is, thinking about PacMan in TNA. Let's go back though before that, and let's relive a little K-Quick. Now, I don't know about you guys. I have a real fondness for K-Quick, or at least I did back in 2001. I thought K-Quick was like the coolest lower card wrestler in the world. And I didn't think of him at that time. Again, I was like 12 or 13. I didn't necessarily think of him as explicitly a lower card wrestler in that like he wasn't that good. I just thought of him, and this is crazy for all you born after 9/11s to realize, but there was a time where RTruth, Ron Killings, K-Quick was thought of as a young guy, a prospect, someone on the rise. I don't remember the exact debut on. I do remember him early on with this version of Road Dogg. And you can see, let me hide the chat comments for just a second. If you can kind of see it on the tiny little screen there. I did. I did have it as on or E. um, I hate this version of Road Dogg. Shout out to Road Dogg for his tweet about RTruth. Shout out to Road Dogg for always presiding over the worst eras of SmackDown whenever he's in charge of creative. All that stuff might not be good. His drug-filled rants on Triple H in the mid-2000s in TNA, those were fun. But the least fun thing that Road Dogg ever did was his partnership with K-Quick, him being the roadie with K-Quick. Now, I gotta assume that this was eventually going to lead to a similar like Jeff Jarrett Road Dogg storyline. Like it seemed a little bit too perfect that once again Road Dogg was being paired up with like a prospective musician character. But this is again some dark times for Road Dogg, and he was released. I don't know when Road Dogg was released, but there's a weird time lapse where Road Dogg's a part of Armageddon 2000. You know, like he's not part of the 6-man match, but I think he's on that show. And then he's just like gone by the time we hit the WrestleMania 17 season. And the New Age Outlaws are just like a thing of the past. We're not that far away. Actually, we're a little bit into the one Billy Gunn reign, which was not great. But all of that seemed to leave Truth in a bit of no man's land. Like I got K-Quick. I got familiar with him on like Jacked and Metal. I got to tell you, when I had that dinosaur, it was every Saturday night that S.A. Rios and K-Quick I thought were like the coolest wrestlers ever. Probably because like I got to see them wrestle every week. And I thought K-Quick was awesome because we don't quite remember this, but there was an era where he was the original rapping wrestler. Now, I don't want to get into a whole thing about this, but do your homework, folks. Who's more believable as a rapper wrestling street character? RTruth or Massachusetts' own John Cena? You can fill in the blanks from there. All that's to say that the Cena character, though, the thugonomic Cena, had not been a thing. And you might argue it's like a Sandman Steve Austin thing, but I think you can say that like Cena, whether he took direct inspiration from Truth or it was just a coincidence and similar taste, had success off of a very similar concept. But K-Quick was never really allowed to blossom in that same kind of way. The other place I got to know K-Quick back in the day was on, I want to say WWE The Music Volume 4, the one with the Rock on the cover with the pie song. Was it Hat Rat Crack? That was his move or whatever the name of his stuff was. Whatever that was, his song was on there. Now, back then too, I wasn't completely aware. Like to be fair to John Cena, he's not the greatest of all time, and he doesn't have necessarily a prolific career. But I think you could say John Cena can rap. I didn't realize that like RTruth or K-Quick or Ron Killings really was this guy who later in life was going to become this aspiring rapper, this guy who was going to do this almost as a second career. And it's an amazing part of putting yourself into the gimmick and creating this really cool gimmick. And everything I've read about this, and I've been fascinated for years. And this is about 2 years ago that I did this research, so I might be a little off on this. But it seems like K-Quick was a victim of the same thing that the young Bryan Danielson was a victim of, in that once the WWF acquired the assets of WCW and some of the ECW stuff, they just simply didn't have enough room for these lower card homegrown talent. I guess we had to make space for like Stasiak and Palumbo and these guys. So guys like K-Quick were released. Guys like Bryan Danielson, who were in developmental, were released. They should really do a collab, especially now. I would love to see that. So, but by the time we get to the invasion, it might be during the. I want to say I have some recollection. Again, I was did the math, about 13 at the time. I have some recollection of like K Quick being in the background cheering on like the Undertaker, those guys during the Alliance and the Invasion, but he definitely does not make it through the storyline. And when the storyline all wraps up and we're in our WCW Redux in 2002, he's nowhere to be found. Where he did pop up, though, was NWA TNA. I think someone said it back there. Yeah, there was Fernando who said it. He won my respect when he beat Ken Shamrock for the NWA championship. If you have never seen the Ron Killings TNA run, do yourself a favor and go back and watch it. For all intents and purposes, it's really the only time in his illustrious 30-year career that he was really and truly presented as a guy atop the card, as a real main event talent. And his promos, especially in this era, were great. He's burying everyone else. He's bitter. He's feuding with Ken Shamrock, as you're mentioning. He's also has a lot of interactions with the Road Dogg and Billy Gunn crew. Now, this is Fairgrounds era TNA. Some of this is weekly pay-per-view TNA. Some of this is Fox Sports Net TNA. So it wasn't exactly like the Spike TV Impact that we all learned to know and love and eventually hate. This was Upstart TNA. This is Jarrett heavy, early Jarrett TNA. There was a great photo a few years ago. They did one of those table for three things on the WWE network, rest in peace. And I don't remember who the third guy was, it was Miz, Truth, and Curtis Axel. I think the common thread was like lower card guys. I'm not sure exactly what that was, but he brought all the photographs, and it was great. It was one of the first times you ever seen any TNA photographs on WWE programming of any sort. And he brought a bunch of photographs of him wrestling Mr. Perfect. We tend to forget all the vets that went through TNA in the early 2000s, like Perfect, like Macho Man. Hogan technically even shows up kind of in Japan, and is at least talked about on TNA television. Truth also did a great job of feuding with the NASCAR guys, which I totally support him feuding with the NASCAR guys. Before I was really plugged into everything, like I guess I was technically smarky, but didn't have access to everything. I remember flipping through the channels. I want to say it was like a Friday afternoon. And I didn't have like the full-on cable package at the time. I had like the Jumpstart cable package, which is basically you get it so you can watch like your network TV shows with good reception. Because it only costs like, I want to say it was like $5 or $7 a month or whatever. But that Fox Sports channel, the one that TNA used to air on, was on that channel. I remember one afternoon, I thought I was in some kind of time warp because I saw Scott Hall, RTruth, the Ron Killings, and a very green, like literally green colored Jeff Hardy just bouncing around I didn't know what the hell was going on. I thought it was awesome what I saw, but I had no idea what the hell was going on. I'd heard of NWA TNA from the PW Insider, PWI, excuse me, and that kind of stuff. But it really just blew my mind that my guy K Quick was out there doing all this stuff, and his run was great until it wasn't. You had other guys coming in that mid 2000s period after that initial run. He got pushed down further on the card. He started picking up a lot of momentum and some other outside media opportunities, and it just wasn't working out anymore in TNA. And I want to say he asked for his release. There was a little bit of tension about him getting let go, and there was a lot on there. What's up, man? What's up, Kamal? So he ended up making his way back to WWE. Before he did that, though, I don't have any visuals of this. Do you guys remember RTruth or Ron Killings or K Quick being in the movie The Wrestler? Do you guys remember that one? Now, he doesn't have like a really big role. I want to say the entirety of his role in that movie is the Mickey Rourke character of The Wrestler. What was the name? Randy the Ram. Yeah. So Randy the Ram, if I recall, okay, this is what it is. Yeah. So Randy the Ram had finally like made good one time with his daughter. Like he's just this neglectful deadbeat dad for all these years, right? Typical wrestler dad. And sorry, wrestlers, that was a joke. I know you got kids, wrestlers, but you get what they were trying to portray. So he has this one like great afternoon with his daughter. They're starting to reconnect, and then they like schedule for the next Saturday. But it's like Saturday, and I think at this point too, Randy the Ram's already had his heart attack. Spoilers for anyone who's concerned about spoilers. So Randy the Ram has his heart attack. And so he's not really active, but then he goes to like a signing that has it's kind of and I think it was an actual event. I can't remember. I don't know if it was WrestleCon, but it was something. But it's a legend signing and an indie show, the typical fare. And then like I want to say that like Ron Killings meets up with Randy the Ram and goes and asks them to like come and have drinks. And at first he says like, no, I can't. Oh, I might as well. And then they go out and have drinks. And then I think Mickey Rourke sleeps with this person who really likes firemen. And then he wakes up the next morning to realize that he's neglected his daughter, and his daughter never speaks to him again. So Randy the Ram never spoke to his daughter again because of the bad influence of Ron Killings. That should just be known. I apologize for that wrestler sidetrack. You guys remember his initial gimmick and vignettes though when he was coming in? Remember this guy on the right over here? I guess my right. The sort of the guy back from the streets, back from serving time in prison. This really kind of cool character that it seemed like they were building in the vignettes. They built these vignettes for a long time. And then he debuts. And I remember immediately, and I don't remember who this was, if it was if this was a Meltzer or Keller report that got I was definitely in this time period, I was only going with the aggregators. I used to go to like, wrestlingnews.co.ba, whatever. I said there's one big aggregation site that would give me like the top 4 wrestling sites, and I would click on the articles. And the reports in media at the time were like Vince and WWE brass didn't like his wrestling and didn't like his conditioning coming in. So there was all this hype on this TNA guy who was originally a WWE guy that had this really cool run and really reinvented himself. And he was one of the first guys, I think, that was sort of coming over like that in a fully rebuilt way. I don't think you can count like Jeff Hardy in the same kind of way. Monty Brown, obviously, came in with a little bit of hype and then fizzled out. But this is one of the first times where they were really doing this kind of thing with an Impact guy. And it seemed to kind of flop out the gate. It eventually found its wider level, but he found it like a lower level tag team guy. It ended up being what he was for that first little run that he had from like 2008 to 2010. Honestly, it felt like a disappointment. It felt like maybe he should have stayed on the independents, although that wasn't as lucrative at the time. But it felt like he just should have done something. But he chugged along, and he was okay. He was still beloved enough, I think, by the WWE universe. I hate using that term except for when it makes sense. He did have himself a WrestleMania match. And look at that. It was for the unified tag team titles. Him and John Morrison teaming together. Now, Truth and Morrison have a very, very linked career. Morrison had a lot of links to guys' stories who went on to do like other things. It's not really a knock on Morrison. He was just always part of that upper mid card for the entirety of his run. He never really broke through to the top, and he never scraped the bottom of the barrel. So everyone on their ascent or before they did something seemed to interact with John Morrison in this time period. It was CM Punk, it was Truth, any of these guys. He gets himself a WrestleMania match. I remember this being kind of cool and feeling like the highlight of his career when he came out of that big, hot stadium in Phoenix. And I remember RTruth being out of breath on the what's ups when he got back. Now, I don't blame him. I don't care who you are. You ever see these rappers when they're doing their things and they're playing like a really intense show with a lot of cardio, and they've got all the background guys like filling in every lyric for them? Well, RTruth only had the Phoenix faithful there to help him out. So I'm not actually sure about that. I feel like I saw some stuff on him recently, somewhere where he popped up. Morrison's been everywhere though, hasn't he? Jeez. But so Truth gets a WrestleMania match out of it. He's doing okay. He's on the lower part of the card. But post WrestleMania, And this is actually, let's skip ahead a year. That was WrestleMania in 2010. He still goes on to do some things throughout the next year, but not a lot of it is notable. You mentioned teaming with Kofi. Truth is around, but he's not very important. Fast forward a year, WrestleMania 27. WrestleMania 27, one of these days, I'm just going to have to do a full-on deep dive. What a weird pay-per-view that was, and all the weird significance of that. Truth, I don't even recall, is a part of that WrestleMania. He may or may not be, but that's not really important. What's important for Truth is what he did right after that WrestleMania. Pretty shortly after that WrestleMania, Truth found himself in basically a revamped version of the month prior to WrestleMania main event. He was going to be the third man in a triple threat now between The Miz and John Cena. But that didn't last very long. In fact, that lasted, his number one contendership, so to speak, lasted about a week. Somehow John Morrison convinced him to put his shot in the match on the line, and he did, and he lost the match. He being RTruth. RTruth gave up what seemed like his one and only shot to be in the main event. But he made the most of it, because right after he lost the match to John Morrison and lost his spot in the main event match, he beat the crap out of Morrison. And not only did he beat up Morrison, I'm going to put this as a little tease as I take a drink of water, then I'll flip the side. Do you guys remember what he did to Morrison immediately upon turning heel on him? Now, you may or may not recall, but part of why they started their little playful beef with each other was Morrison said that RTruth was a great athlete for someone who smoked cigarettes. Now, this was odd even at the time. Like in 2011, smoking was already pretty passe. It's extremely passe nowadays, smoking cigarettes at least. I don't know, with all you Gen Zers and those weird pens that you guys puff on and all that crap. But back in our day, you used to have to light a fire and get plants and smoke and set off fire alarms. Vapes. Anyway, what? That's wild too that RTruth was wrestling in WWE and like a full-time smoker. I think like Randy Orton has like a proclivity for cigarettes. That's always been a thing, but I don't think Orton is, I could be wrong about this, but I really don't think Orton's like walking around with like a pack of Reds, just like going up and down the road, just there smoking them if he's gotten them. I don't think that's what Orton's doing, but that was at least how it was portrayed by Truth. So what did Truth do after he beat him up? He smoked on him. Yeah, that's right. He got himself a I don't know how he found a cigarette ringside. Maybe he got it from Michael Cole there in the coal mine, which, by the way, doing research on all this crap, WWE was terrible through a lot of 2011, and a big part of it is because of that damn coal mine, because of Michael Cole's heel character. Having the lead color analyst be a heel, not a great recipe for success. But yeah, speaking of heel things, honestly, and I smoked cigarettes back in the day. It's been over a decade. I can't think of anything grosser or more hillish right now than someone after they beat me up out of my sweaty body, if they were just blow cigarette smoke all up and down me. Like that would drive me insane. So that was the start of the heel turn, the smoke and heel turn. And I remember there was actually like complaints or criticisms where WWE had to respond and say that like smoking a cigarette seems to be a common occurrence on PG programming. You gotta remember this is 2011, so we're like peak PG, advertiser friendly, kid friendly. I think smoking a cigarette though is almost worse than like drug use or alcohol use on one of these things, because it was something so dated, and it's like something that specifically, very very specifically, there's like this push to not market to kids. Now, I think Truth looked cool because I think people who smoke cigarettes are cool because I'm a very old man. But weird vibe, weird way of starting the entire heel thing. He kept it going though. He actually cost Morrison the title at I put EC up there like elimination here, but Extreme Rules 2011. This was weird post WrestleMania because like Miz and Cena never really got a proper feud. The next month they would have their big blow off match, but it was like always weird. There was a lot of Alex Riley involved, and what we're going to talk about is the entirety of 2011 is clouded by three men: CM Punk, The Rock, and John Cena. Just screw up everything going on in WWE in 2011 for very different reasons, but they're all very interconnected. It was weird though, because now Truth was like mean and evil, and he hadn't really hit his stride until about the next month. Now, I don't think anybody remembers this match. I think you guys remember the match that this is all leading up to, the match he actually gets for the title. But I don't know how many of you remember this match. Do you guys remember Over the Limit 2011 and RTruth and Rey Mysterio opening the show and it being like a 5-minute showcase for the newly healed RTruth? I guarantee you, unless you're like the most hardcore Truth or Mysterio fan, none of you guys remember that. What a time that was. And you go back and watch it, as I did last night. In 2011 is hard to find on Peacock. I'm like ashamed of 2011. Some of this stuff is very difficult to find. It's on there. It's just like difficult to find. He cuts his promo at the beginning. He starts referencing these little guys that he would become so known for. Talks about it being a conspiracy. And is basically, he starts in on this heel character against the children. I mean, now we know him as a 53-year-old guy, but back then he was, I guess, early 40s, and the roster was just a lot younger, even though it felt like there was not new stars breaking through. I think there also wasn't like 45, 48-year-old AJ Styles and CM Punks and these guys with the super athleticism into their later years. Even back then, Truth was kind of the old guy on the block. And it made a little more sense for him to have like kids the age of the children in the WWE universe, especially at this time, because that was so much explicitly their audience. Truth gets the win here, but it's kind of his only major match before his major program. Truth was great though, leading into the next month. Truth was all over the place. Look at him. He's crashing press conferences. There he is. It's very tiny, but in the upper right-hand corner, you can see him, Vince McMahon, and I don't know what Raw guest host that was, because unfortunately you can't go back and watch the Raws anymore on Peacock. But you guys remember RTruth dressed up as a Confederate soldier? Does that seem to ring a bell for you? Seemed to be a real proud moment in WWE history. So Truth was like off his rocker in this feud, and this is the start of all of the modern Truth that we know today. Truth was always a little silly since he came back. There was always a lightheartedness to him. He always had that comedic timing that he still has. But the official narrative of RTruth has lost his mind started right here. This was the genesis of all of it. And it was a combination at first of Truth just being delusional as a guy who hadn't got a main event. It's sort of, the aggrieved heel. Pretty common trope in wrestling. It was a combination of that, and he's so delusional that like he doesn't know what's going on. Now, in later years, I think you can argue they just simply shifted it to RTruth is dumb. And that became like his character, is that he's dumb. Which I always thought if they could find a way, and they sort of they hit on it once where it's like, no, it's not that, yes, he plays dumb, but he ends up getting himself into main events, this and that. I think they could have done something with that, but they never really did. At this point, I don't think it was so much that he was dumb. It's that he was so angry and so delusional about his place in the company that he just came across like he was a crazy person. Yeah, dressing up as a Confederate, that was odd. This is also like there's a lot going on right now. So I should probably pause the timeline just a little bit there for some further context on WWE in this time period. So early 2011, it's doldrums. The Miz is the champion. WrestleMania just seems like it's just god awful. There's these celebrity guest hosts every week. It's terrible. And then The Rock shows up right before Elimination Chamber. Doesn't do anything back then. See, back then he used to show up right before Elimination Chamber and then not do anything, not show up at Elimination Chamber. Now he shows up at Elimination Chamber, but doesn't make it to WrestleMania. That's kind of The Rock's new schedule. But back then, he didn't really show up there, but he was quote unquote back for whatever that meant. And what that ended up meaning was that he would host WrestleMania to set up the next year's WrestleMania. So it's not necessarily like WWE got hotter, but they definitely got more attention. If you recall, the Raws in the time period where The Rock was just announced to be back with the company, not even Raws that he was announced for, but the Raws that he was announced back for the company. Remember, there was a string of sellouts that they hadn't had in years. So in that sense, things had kind of taken off. But there was a match that was announced for the upcoming year. And so it also took the focus off of everything. Anything Cena was doing suddenly seemed unimportant. And there was a really big thing that happened right after what we're going to talk about that really, really, really made all of this seem kind of forgettable. But that is sort of the state of things. Now, outside of that storyline, this was Punk and Orton at Mania, not Punk and Orton how you would think of them now. Same thing with Cody and Mysterio, not how you would think of them now. Miz and Cena was really a proxy thing for The Rock. Yes, Triple H and Undertaker had a pretty good match, but WrestleMania 27, not that well received of a card. And overall, the company just didn't feel good during this period whatsoever. You also have like Tough Enough the Steve Austin season of Tough Enough, which is a great season of Tough Enough, but you have like the weird ending, and I know that Truth stuff was kind of tied into that when they did the finale on Raw. It was a weird summer. It was a weird summer and fall. It really was. And then you also had Mean Truth. This was my favorite part about this. Do you recall him throwing? Was it popcorn or water? I watched the video clip yesterday. I want to say it was popcorn that he threw in that dad's face that was all wearing the Cena shirts. Remember, there was even one line where RTruth says, "I miss my son," as part of this. Like, he was so mad that the kids, those dang children, had invested in this evil John Cena, or as he perceived him as evil. He would open the show a few times in this feud with Cena. Now, this was a piece of serendipity that really worked out well. There was an episode of Raw that RTruth opened from the merch stand, and he's just cutting promos on the merch. I love when the heel cuts promo on the merch. Like, look how stupid this John Cena shirt is for $19.99. It's great when heels cut promos on the merch. Freaking chain. But he starts out there, and he's going in on the company. I think there's some stuff about Vince that he says in there. Now, according to everything that was talked about at the time, and I don't think anyone's like done a deep dive to investigate this years later, but definitely the feed I was watching, it felt like it was one of those things where, the WWE corporate's cutting his mic because of the things he's saying. Well, you get on those shady aggregator sites the next day, and turns out it's just in some places you had technical difficulties on Raw. Actually, I guess the original airing, there was a technical difficulty on the audio that he had. We came to the West Coast viewing, clear as day, everything he had to say. So the promo I remember being transcribed the next day on the internet. But it was a great concept. I think it was the same Raw where he ended up throwing the stuff in that guy's face. And again, it was a mixture of a little bit of the silliness, quite a bit of the silliness, and I think some like legitimate aggrievement. There was also Truth's new entrance at this point. You guys remember this? So it was literally RTruth voiceover going, "The truth shall set you free," and then no music. Now, no music can have different levels of effect, but this was really supposed to be a play off of I don't like the cheesy WWE kids John Cena kind of thing. As someone mentioned earlier, kind of trying to push the limits of the PG era. This is all very much PG, but RTruth did represent sort of the adult in the room of PG. And that leads us to this thing. Now, this is a photo from, I want to say probably like from 2012, when the whole Little Jimmy thing had really become a thing. But this is where it started. It was with this feud. It might have been with the Mysterio feud a little bit, but he would call the kids the Little Jimmies, the suckers, before they became his imaginary, invisible friend. Then it became a silly RTruth storyline. The original idea of just little Jimmy being a proxy for the mindless kids that buy all the John Cena merch, that gets its origin over here as well. And it leads eventually to main event truth at WWE's Capital Punishment. Now, WWE has some great posters in 2011 because of just some of the things on it. So for instance, you have here Barack Obama seemingly reffing a match between Rey Mysterio and John Cena. Obama did not appear on the pay-per-view. Although there was some controversy when they sort of intercut one of his speeches with like the opening monologue of the show. I think they had to release a statement confirming that he was not like in co-promotion with them. Just seems like a million years ago, doesn't it? Now the match itself. The promo package was great. I thought with RTruth saying here in our nation's capital where we need injustice to be rectified, all that was good. The match, not so much. Not so much at all. It was as basic of a basic John Cena match as you could get. A little bit of selling, a little bit of offense, a little bit of crowd work. It makes some of the matches he has with Randy Orton look like 5-star classics, to be honest with you. I was watching this, and it's not that long. It's only like 14 minutes long, but I was feeling the Vince thing of maybe this guy can't work. Not really true, but maybe not at that main event level. And this is before I think John Cena had hit that little bit of that late career prime where he was pretty much having a good match with everyone. Cena was having good matches in 2011, but just not all the time. There was still a little bit of that boring John Cena that he had in him. What you see there in the corner is actually what led to the finish. As you can see, as he got showboaty after a near fall off of a scissor kick, RTruth goes outside the ring, steals the drink from a little kid. But this little bastard, just look what he did. He soaked RTruth in water. And as RTruth's all angry in the ring, he comes in, he eats an F5 from John Cena. And America is saved. And we don't have a Truth Championship. All of that effectively ended his run in the main event because much bigger things went down the next month. So what happened? Why didn't Truth quite become like a main event guy out of this feud? Well, there's a few things that we can discuss on this. But the long and short of it, despite everything that went on in WWE in 2011, it all just turned into, the entire year turned into a year-long build to WrestleMania 28. So as I said, everything John Cena did kind of felt irrelevant, at least, well, until the next month. But definitely anything on the prospect that John Cena was doing all felt like filler. And you figured, because you didn't think the match, at least this year, was going to be for the title, eventually the title was going to come off him. But I don't think anyone in their heart of hearts believed it would be RTruth on this 1 month build after turning heel just recently, actually coming in there and taking the title from him. The only other time we had really seen something similar to that would have been JBL over Eddie. This wouldn't have actually been as extreme as that was, but it would have been pretty close. And this is also pre-Jinder Mahal. Excuse me. This is pre-Jinder Mahal. But this feud in general was a proxy feud for like the overarching narrative in WWE for a couple of years. This story that they really tried to sell with Cena. Now, this was a little more nuanced version than some of the other versions of that they did. Because at the same time, you also had The Rock, who was kind of face-ish, who was trying to put a distinction between himself, the Attitude Era, adults in general, and the kid-friendly PG Fruity Pebble current era WWE. Essentially, that was the same storyline that RTruth was running, but RTruth was a heel. So I think RTruth actually came across a little bit better than what The Rock was trying to do. Obviously, he's not The Rock, and their match would never be as big as these guys' matches. But also, though, because and you could even say there's a version of this that he did with Bray Wyatt, but it's more of the embrace the hate storyline. I don't think any of those storylines ever really resonated either, though, like those specific storylines, because Cena's ultimately a face at the end of the day, and he was a super face on top of that. So it's not like he could take the kids, the literal children of the like. It's not like I'd be there at a show. I can imagine being there, and you like, and my son being like a Cena fan, and me being, I don't know, a Truth fan or a fan of the other ones, and like thinking like my son's an actual heel in that kind of way, and like really despising that. They didn't really hit that right 10. I think now there's like annoying groups of fans that are a little less, that are a little more mature than children, that you could do stuff like that. But I don't know. When we start having those sort of really, really meta stuff, it doesn't always fit like televised wrestling. But as I said, the Truth feud was a little bit different take on the angle. Truth was less trying to recruit the WWE universe to follow him, and he was more in disdain of them. So that's a little more true of a heel. You know, it's like, it's not one of these things where this heel has a point, even though you might ultimately agree with him. Truth was just supposed to be a jerk. And it's funny because as much as I think there was some praise for this character, it wasn't fully fleshed out. It's not like, of all these guys that people were like, okay, the belt needs to go to him, the belt needs to go to him. People like Truth, but I don't think there was this real clamoring to make sure Truth got the title. And if you rewatch this feud, like in clips as I did, or kind of rapidly without having to watch the show and some of the edited stuff, the feud looks great. It looks like it was really well put together. It looks like, wow, Truth's main event run was pretty awesome. But ultimately, if you watched it in context and if you really look at it, I think there's a few reasons why the angle was just a bridge to two other much bigger angles. First off, I think the obvious thing has to be the eternal framing of RTruth. RTruth is a little bit of a joke prior to this feud. He gets into this feud, and yes, he does serious and hillish stuff, but he actually becomes more of a joke. So it's almost as if, you know, the guy walking around in the Confederate outfit isn't necessarily taken seriously as a contender to your big title. And again, WWE is in a bit of like an identity crisis point at this point. They're very specifically trying to cater to two different audiences and doing it in a very, very clumsy kind of way. And I don't think they actually served either audience too well with it. Although I think they did a much better job with those younger fans. And those are the guys that are quite frankly filling up the stands right now at WWE shows. This was before, though, they would go into the full-on like, hey, isn't it hilarious that Truth is dumb? This was more Truth was delusional. But even at that, it didn't seem like Truth was a champion. Now, if there's any time when the title maybe didn't mean as much, this might be it, because you just had Miz coming off of a title reign where it was a very cheap title reign. But you never believed that this was anything other than a one-off. The other thing that I think really affected this is just simply the timing. I mentioned earlier that in the wake of the announcement of what was coming with The Rock the next year, WrestleMania, all of the Cena stuff, all of it had just a little bit of a filler edge to it. It reminded me of watching Better Call Saul about 2 years ago. And I won't spoil anything, but there's a scene at the end. And there's a protagonist and antagonist in the truest sense. Not good guys and bad guys, but those things, protagonist and antagonist. They're in a bit of a situation where only one of them is going to make it out alive. Well, being that you've seen the next series, you know which one is going to do it. That was kind of the case here with the Cena Rock stuff. You knew where all of this was going to end up. So the positioning and how they got there wasn't necessarily that important because you knew exactly where they were going to go. It took a lot of intrigue and mystery away. So that tempered down, I think, anything John Cena did from being super exciting and super engaging. On top of that, think about this timeline I've just told you. It's like a few weeks after WrestleMania, he sort of starts developing this heel character, has a real one-off match with Mysterio, finds himself as a number one contender, and is in his first main event with John Cena. So again, like a JBL, like a Jinder Mahal, not like a Jey Uso, if you want to make that comparison, because that's not the case. But there's not a lot of following the guy here. Even if it's a heel path, there's still a following there. You're following the person on this path. There was no path to follow here, which again made all of this reek as one-off, as something that wasn't going to be anything to be taken seriously. I honestly think, though, because of the parts of it that were really good, like the serious truth promos, that had this been given a proper amount of time, say he turns at the beginning of the year and they meet in midsummer, and there's a lot of lower card feuds, there's establishing truth in this character and what to do, I think it could have been great. I think it could have been amazing. I think all the pieces were in place for it to be good. They just simply didn't give it enough time, and it came to be at the wrong time. The roster was not as deep as it's felt in the last 10 years. The roster felt a little thinner. Yes, there were guys that you felt were held down, but it's not like once Cena came off his feuds with The Miz and The Rock that there was just tons of contenders that it made sense for him to have all these real big matches, but he kind of feuded with everyone. And in this time period, the sad truth about it is no one is super, super over. On top of that, I think this storyline has been a little overlooked. People they know what happened, and they like to skip forward to what the RTruth character that became so beloved after the fact. People like to skip up to that one. I think people have forgotten that this was the bridge, though. This was the bridge to a very, very important pay-per-view that happened the month after Capital Punishment. You guys remember what that was? What all this led to? That's right. It led to Hornswoggle and Big Show main eventing at Money in the Bank. Not exactly. But the next pay-per-view after Capital Punishment 2011 is Money in the Bank 2011. If Capital Punishment is one of the forgotten one-off pay-per-views, Money in the Bank 2011 will never be forgotten. We're still living with the consequences of Money in the Bank 2011. Truth did play a role. He wasn't on the show, but he did play a role. It was a match. I want to wait. Okay. I don't think the stakes of the match are in this, but if you recall the end of that Raw in Vegas, that CM Punk comes out, sits with his legs crossed, and hopes that John Cena is sitting there as uncomfortable as possible. Well, it's because John Cena has just been in a tables match with RTruth, effectively ending the RTruth run at the top of the card. That was Cena's bridge to Punk. Now, I don't think they didn't have the foresight to know what Money in the Bank 2011 was going to be. I think if they had the foresight, they would have had a better follow-up. But doing his part, as always, the guy that's just right there, RTruth did just enough to get us to Punk versus Cena in Chicago, contract on the line, everything that happened. Story doesn't exactly end there, though. There was one more main event that year for RTruth. You guys remember what it was? Yep. He got a main event with The Rock, too. Well, it was Miz and Truth. This is the remix. Remember that? Miz and Truth versus The Rock and Cena. Now, if you forgot about that, if you forgot that was a thing, I don't blame you. Because during the match, Booker T on commentary, which I had to sit through a lot of Booker T the last couple of days on commentary. Booker T is going on, hey, this ain't about Truth and Miz. This is all about The Rock and Cena. He says that on commentary during the match. So if you wondered how that match was gonna go down. And then unfortunately, right after that, and this is something no one ever brings up, Truth was working that match on a wellness violation, so he was gone for another 30 days. But coming back from that suspension, he basically comes back with that silly RTruth character that he refined until basically 2 weeks ago. And that's how we got to that. So that was a look at RTruth's time in the main event time. The little brief moment in time where he was pushed to the top of the card. Ultimately, he was a bridge to CM Punk, and he was filler for John Cena to get to The Rock. But he was still part of the story. And mixed bag. but I don't think you could fault any of the performances of Truth in that situation. All right, guys, this is too perfect. I hit the post exactly at 8:01. So I'm going to say we all have about 4 hours of AEW Dynamite to watch. So why don't we go ahead and do that? Yes, I know Apple Watch. I know I can still do it. You think I want to still do it? I don't want to reach my goals today. What I want to do is watch Dynamite for the next 4 hours. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Thanks for hanging with me for that hour. Thanks for reliving the ups and downs of that special time in Truth's career. We're not going to cover the Flair tweets this week. Flair had himself some great tweets, didn't he? Always looking for attention, that Ric Flair. I want attention next week. So I will talk to you guys then. See ya.